Welcome back. We're going to talk about Elias Pettersson of the Vancouver Canucks. There's a lot on this board, so maybe a longer-ish video. We'll see what happens. Getting started, he is a centerman for the Vancouver Canucks, as I just said. 6'2", 176 pounds, little on the skinnier side, not really known for his physicality. Can take a hit, can somewhat throw a hit. He's the age 25. He was a 5th overall pick in the 2017 NHL entry-level draft. Starting off with his rookie season in the 2018-2019 year, 71 games played, 28 goals, 38 assists, 66 points. He was a +3. Those are respectable numbers for any type of rookie, especially a rookie centerman coming into the league. He won the Rookie of the Year trophy, known as the Calder, as Best Rookie of the Year. And his numbers would tell you he probably deserved it. Very respectable stats. He worked his way up real quick to the top 6 centerman role, and he thrived there. He really did. The only concern was the face-off percentage, but realistically, rookies coming into the league, you kind of expect them to be low 30s or low 40s. Usually around 40, 41, maybe 42% in the face-off dot. So that's not super surprising or concerning, but an area for improvement nonetheless. Going into year number 2, the 2019-2020 season, 68 games played, 27 goals, 39 assists, 66 points, +16. So same number of points in 3 less games played, 1 less goal, 1 more assist type thing. But the +16 kind of sticks out. That's positive. 41.8% in the face-off dot. A 0.8% improvement, which is an improvement, but you want to start seeing a little more, but it's the second season. It's not something to be overly concerned about. Year 3, 2020, 2021, 26 games played, 10 goals, 11 assists, 21 points. You had a plus-minus of a 0, 45% in the face-off dot. Again, only 26 games played, so take that with a grain of salt. Or will we? 2021-22 season, so 4 years into the league, 80 games played, 32 goals, first time hitting 30-plus goals. 36 assists, 68 points, career high in points. He's a +1. Face-off percentage, 44.1%. Year 4, you're still around 44%. That starts to get a little concerning. You want to start seeing that incremental increase in the face-off dot, and we haven't quite seen that just yet. Going to last year, 80 games played. So all but 2 games for 2 straight years. 39 goals, pretty close to 40. 63 assists, 103 points. So career highs in every category and his first 100-point season. He was a +16. That face-off percentage, though, 44.3%. Again, you're in year 5. You'll want that to be somewhere at the lowest, 46 at the lowest. 48 is fine, right? Coming into this year, though, 62 games played, which I think is every game. He's played every game for the Vancouver Canucks this year. 29 goals, 46 assists, 75 points. He's a +12. I don't know if he'll reach 100 points. It'll be close. I think he's on track to get somewhere in the mid-90s. So we'll see. But the +12 is positive. But the team is also on top of the leaderboard. Pretty much the entire team is a positive in that aspect. Face-off percentage, though, 49.3%. That's that jump you wanted to see from Pettersson. And you hope this is sustainable and he can sustain a face-off percentage of above 48% for the remainder of his extension that he just signed. So solid stats overall. His average time on ice, it's between 19 and about 20. I think it was one season it was a little over 20. Number 1 center, playing number 1 center minutes. Not a bad offensive player. I don't think he'll break either of his goals or assists marks from last year, but he could. There's still like 20 games left. So quick math. 82 minus 62, 20. Let's talk about his current contract. This is his last year of his 3-year deal that he signed as a restricted free agent. $7.35 million as an annual average value, cap hit. He was a restricted free agent July 1st of this summer. He just signed an extension for 8 years. So this starts July 1st, starts this upcoming season. $11.6 million as an annual average value. Half of that contract is in base salary. Half of that contract is in signing bonuses. It's about 45-ish million each. It will walk him to unrestricted free agency, but again, also in 8 years, which is the maximum amount of time you can sign a player for. After this following season, the first year of the contract, it's a full no movement clause, so you can't send him down to the AHL without his permission. You can't really do a whole lot, but you can't trade him. You can't. The only thing you can really do is buy him out, which is going to be difficult because the buyout penalty is it's not great. So there's like years fluctuating up and down, but for the last 3 years of his 8-year contract, the cap hit will be $8.85 million, which is it's quite a bit. So you're only really going to look at buying a player out like this if they're causing issues in the locker room, which I don't think Pettersson is or will be that kind of negative influence in the locker room. You never know. But that's kind of why Parise and Suter were bought out in Minnesota, was because they needed a culture change. And those were two of the problem childs in that locker room. Awards won. He won the Calder, Rookie of the Year, as we talked about. He's been nominated for the Lady Byng Award, or got votes, 4 times. He finished 8th, 12th, 14th, and 24th. For those that don't know, the Lady Byng is just a sportsmanship award, right? So nothing really too intense on the ice. There's a little bit of on-ice stuff, but Selke, he was rated or came in 7th place for the Selke vote last season. Selke is best defensive forward in the league. He was good. He was very good. Again, I don't know if I'd put him in that elite defensive category. I definitely wouldn't this year. From what I've watched of him, again, I think the best defensive forward on his current team, the Vancouver Canucks, at this time is Teddy Blueger. That dude is unreal in his own zone. So I don't know. I don't even have Pettersson as the best defensive forward on his own team. So take it with a grain of salt. I think there are other better, more elite options on defense league-wide. But Pettersson also putting up over a point per game, which is impressive. So, he finds a balance, and he kind of keeps it, and it works. All right, let's talk about existing contracts on the Vancouver Canucks. Now, they have a ton of expiring contracts this season and next year. Some of these guys are going to get paid. You think of guys like Filip Hronek, who I believe is a restricted free agent, playing first-line minutes, really holding down the defensive end of that first pairing blue line with Quinn Hughes. Hronek has relied a lot on defense for that team, so he'll get a nice pay raise, and he can provide a little bit of offense too. So he'll get a he'll get a raise for sure. They have JT Miller signed for 7 years, and that includes this season at $8 million per season. Can be a polarizing player. Can really wears his heart on his sleeve, and can either positively or negatively affect his team on the ice in any given game. I've seen it go both ways. He's really come out as like a motivational kind of guy. Some games, and other games he's incredibly frustrated, and it really lowers the morale of the whole Vancouver Canucks team. We saw that against the Minnesota Wild. When the Wild put up 10 goals against Vancouver, JT Miller was slamming his stick in the back while on the ice, not running back to defense, just throwing a little hissy fit in the back. So polarizing player, but for his production, for his overall play, $8 million seems to be a pretty solid contract. Quinn Hughes signed for 4 more years, including this year. So 3 years after this year, $7.85 million. He's obviously going to get a nice, handsome pay raise as well. Should well exceed. If Quinn Hughes was up for a contract extension this year, it would probably exceed Pettersson's $11.6 million. Quinn Hughes, we're probably talking in that 12.5 to 13 range. And you still have the Oliver Ekman-Larsson buyout penalties for 5 more seasons, not including this year. Next year it'll be $2.3 million penalty. The following 2 seasons, $4.7 million penalty against the cap. And the final 2 seasons, $2.1 million against the cap. This year was like $140,000-ish, give or take, maybe like $10,000. So not a whole lot this year, but the cap penalties will be going up for OEL. Comparable contracts. Now this is kind of where it gets a little difficult for Pettersson in terms of comparing his contract extension to existing contracts. There are a lot of 1Cs, number one centers that are due up this year or next year for contract extensions or free agency signings. So there weren't a whole lot of comparables, and some of the comparables were a little older. And I didn't want to use McKinnon because I feel like McKinnon and Pettersson are very different players. Right, Jack Eichel in Vegas. That contract was signed years ago. That's like gonna expire in the next couple of years. I think that was a long-term contract. So I got Pastrnak. He signed, or that contract. This is his first year of the contract extension, right? First year, so pretty recent. He signed 8 years at $11.25 million, so slightly less than Pettersson's $11.6. Pastrnak this year, 62 games played, 38 goals, 49 assists, 87 points. He's a plus 18. So in every category, Pastrnak exceeds, goals, assists, plus minus. Pastrnak, a winger. Pettersson, a center. Defensive play, Pettersson's probably a little better. Pastrnak has played very good defense this year, which you didn't see at all last year. Right. Very good. It's game dependent, right? I'd say about league average, maybe slightly above league average because of his inconsistency. So Pettersson, better defensive player. Pastrnak, better offensive player. Pastrnak, a little cheaper. William Nylander, who just signed an extension not too long ago. I think I did a video on that. 60 games played this year, 33 goals, 50 assists, 83 points, right? So we're still beating Pettersson in every single category. His plus minus, though, is just 0. Right? He signed for 8 years at $11.5 million. So slightly, $100,000 less a year than Nylander, or than Pettersson. Nylander obviously can play elite defense, although he doesn't. That's a whole conversation for another time. But I wore my Leafs jersey. All these Leafs fans being like, "Oh, why don't you just get a normal Leafs jersey, or why don't you just get a fake?" Well, I got a real one, so it's Austin Matthews, hand stitched. It's great. I really lucked out with it. Got the Bruins tattoo just for the comparables. I wore a Canucks jersey when I did my last Pettersson video a couple days ago, so I want to change it up a bit. Next up, another Toronto Maple Leafs, Austin Matthews. Again, tough to compare. Austin Matthews, 59 games played this year, 53 goals, which is just absurd. 26 assists, 79 points, plus 21. So you're Matthews beating Pettersson in every stat except assists, but man, his goals, 53 goals in 59 games is absurd. He signed for 4 years at $13.25 million. Again, it was really hard to find a comparable 1C. I don't think necessarily Matthews and Pettersson are super comparable. Matthews more of a goal scorer. Pettersson more of a playmaker type guy who's got a good shot too. Matthews, when he plays defense, I'd put him at a better echelon or a higher echelon than Pettersson. But the question is, when do you get defense out of Matthews on the ice? Seems to be very hit or miss, and it's been a lot of misses this year. So I think Matthews is capable of playing better defense than Pettersson, but Pettersson has played defense more consistently throughout the year. So this year I'd say Pettersson is the better defensive player, but in overall defensive talent, it's got to be Matthews. But Matthews also making quite a bit more than Pettersson will make. Matthew Tkachuk, I don't know, another winger. 61 games played this year, 21 goals, 48 assists, 69 points. So slightly less than Pettersson's production. He is plus 14. Tkachuk also a pretty two-way player, very physical guy, can really change a game. Coming off back-to-back 100-plus point seasons, so again, comparable-ish. I think this is year 2 of his contract. 8 years, $9.5 million. And the last I got is Sebastian Aho, because struggling to find those 1Cs that were comparable. 58 games played, 24 goals, 40 assists, 64 points. He's a plus 13. So what do we got? Fairly close, 5 less goals, 6 less assists than Pettersson in 4 less games, in a +1 over Pettersson. He signed for 8 years at $9.75 million. Aho plays a lot of solid defense. He's relied a lot more on defense for his team than Pettersson is. And I think as a result, and that's kind of how Aho and the Hurricanes have always been, is, defense is important. Let's sacrifice a little bit of offense to play solid defense, and it works. It's a solid system. But Aho is extremely talented. I'm sure if he was able to let loose a bit, if he had some responsible defensive wingers or something, this could be, he could probably eclipse the 100-point mark. He's that good, and he's kind of restrained a bit over there. So $11.6 million. After looking at various contracts throughout the league, I looked at others. It seems a little high, sure, but when you think about it, the going rate for number one center on almost any team, like a legitimate number one center, not a placeholder, you have to think is somewhere around that $10 million mark anyway, right? Pettersson, a very, very good number one center, nonetheless, well over a point per game, plays decent defense, working on his faceoff percentage. It's, creeping to 50. If he can eclipse that 50 mark, that's fantastic. $11.6 million seems about right. I had him pegged for between 11 and 12.5. And we see teams spend a little more and a little more because the cap goes up a little more every year, right? And I don't really care to look at that with some of these comparable contracts. Because everybody knows how much the cap is going up for the most part in the next year or so. So the Pastrnak signing, we already knew what the cap increase was going to be for this year, right? Same with it's the same constraints that you're working with Pettersson, because the cap didn't increase at the time Pasternak's contract was signed, which don't quote me on that because it's pretty close. Might have been. Right? It's like you have the same information when you're signing Pettersson versus Pastrnak. So there's that. I guess Pastrnak was a year before, but still, right? Just as an example, William Nylander as well. Same kind of info. Nylander, the better offensive forward, without a doubt. Not playing as good defense as Pettersson this year, but nonetheless, same info as Pettersson as Nylander. Our wingers also not as important. Now I don't want to say as important, but centers are highly coveted throughout the league, right? There's a lot of wingers. You can always pick up a winger. Maybe you get a top 6 winger in free agency or through the trade market. But when you're talking about those 1 or 2 centers, the cost is high because they're not as common as top 6 wingers. So $11.6 million, about right. I'm not too mad at this contract. I think it'll age just fine. I think Pettersson's pretty solid. My concern with this team moving forward is if they really, I don't know how to put this, if they stop playing defense like they currently are, they could regress quite a bit. This is a team that needs to play team defense because, right? They've been focusing on offense for so long and really had a lot of holes in their defensive core. And you got Thatcher Demko back there, and he's fantastic, right? Can't throw shade at Thatcher Demko. And even some of those defensive players are pretty solid. But again, if your forwards are not playing defense, you're not setting your team up for success. You're not really keeping your team in the hunt to get consistent wins night in, night out. Defense is just as important as offense. Again, we see this with we saw this with the Vancouver Canucks, right? When they got their coach Rick Tocchet, he brought in that defensive mindset. All of a sudden, they go from missing the playoffs. I had them missing the playoffs in my projections. I know a lot of other people did too, to being at top of the league for the entire season. We see the same kind of issues in Buffalo, in Ottawa, for example. We see these issues, and so my concern is, Pettersson, JT Miller, Quinn Hughes, some of these veteran players, some of these core players, should the defensive system lapse a bit, will they go back to being a mediocre to bottom 10, 15 team? Do we see that happen? So again, all these players were here during the bad times. what happens if there's not as prominent of a defensive structure as there is now going forward? Do we see this team pull back a bit, fall down into a wild card spot, or out of the playoffs? It's very likely that should happen. Should Rick Tocchet give up on playing defense or be fired, for example? Rick Tocchet, one of the better, if not elite defensive coaches in the league, and you got to give him credit for that. Love him or hate him, he's done wonders with getting this team to buy into team defense. You have wingers and you have centermen coming back to cover the slot in front of your own goaltender. If you got like Quinn Hughes chasing the blue line, which he does, it's not like uncommon for Quinn Hughes to chase somebody to the blue line, but there's always somebody back to cover for that defensive lapse, right? Plenty of layers. So my concern is, once that goes away, should it go away, how is this contract going to look then? And not necessarily this contract, but the JT Miller contract, the Quinn Hughes contract, for example. How is that, what do you do with your core if you need to change something up in the future? What do you do? Because, I'm sure Quinn Hughes going to get a buyout-proof contract. I don't know about JT Miller's. Elias Pettersson, buyout-proof contract type thing. So we'll see. That's just forward-thinking foresight. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. It's way too early to tell that. Vancouver Canucks fans should be riding high right now, enjoying this team. So that's all I got. Pettersson, overall, pretty solid signing. I don't think it's a bad signing. I don't think he's necessarily overpaid or underpaid. I think he's about right. I was expecting him to sign somewhere in the 12 to 12.5 million mark, so 11.6, a little bit surprising. But I'll take it. It's a win. I think it's a win for both the player and the team. Vancouver, very nice city, very mild climate. A lot of people love playing there. I know the media can be a little harsh there, but welcome to playing in big markets. It's like that in every single major sport in the U.S., right? I'm from Boston. The Red Sox are in that limelight every single year. It's some players perform well, some don't, and you can't really predict that going in. So it's one of those things. Pettersson has played well. It's a nice area to live. It's a nice area to raise and grow a family if you choose to. I don't know about his personal life. So again, I think it's a win-win for player and team. That's all I got. Again, a little over 22 minutes. So appreciate you sticking with me. Take care. All right.